All right, welcome back here. Thanks for joining us on the Gill Connections podcast. Hey, before we get into today's guest, which I'm really excited about, I think you're going to learn a lot. I think we're going to all learn a lot here. I just want to say something real quick from the heart. When we're recording this, not necessarily when you're listening to this, but when we're recording this, we just got the news about Brooks Johnson's passing. And there's a lot of comments, and it's really heartfelt. It's amazing when, I talk about the positive impact a coach makes on young people. And if you are on social media right now, here in the 24, 48 hours of Brooks passing, boy, you get to see it in real time, the positive impact a coach can make on not only young people, the kids and adults that he coached, but also on other coaches. Brooks defined what a coach's coach is. He was selfless till literally the day he passed away in regards to helping other coaches coach and think about coaching in different ways. And I think I know the coaching body is better off for it and for him. And I'm just so grateful that, our lives passed and intertwined. One of those is, and, I hesitate putting this out there in social media because I never want it to look like or feel like I'm quote unquote profiteering off of a death. However, I will say it here, since you are a podcast listener, since you're here listening to today's episode, if you haven't, I would go back and listen to episode 42. That was our episode with Brooks. And so, we're in episode 260, 270. So this was a long time ago. Brooks took a chance, believed in what we were doing here, and joined us on the podcast to talk about his journey in the great profession of coaching track and field. And it was amazing. He is amazing, and what he did and what he went through is quite amazing. I think there's value in hearing that story from him. But also, he challenges, and Brooks, this is true. He will challenge you as a coach in how you think about coaching and how you think about the sport of track and field in coaching. He said some really amazing things about how all the events are the same. We're moving the center of mass. Just depends on if we're doing it for a long time, like a marathon, or in a circle, like a shot put. And so being a coach is not necessarily about being a distance coach, a throws coach, etc. You're a track coach. And then he brought to light something that I explored a lot and literally had this conversation last week with my wife. So it really did affect my life. He brought up George Williams, his statement about if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. Learned a lot from Brooks about that, and then had to go out and pursue and got George Williams onto the podcast as well to hear it straight from the man himself. So I just want to implore you, first of all, if you knew Brooks, my prayers go out to you, because he touched a lot of people's lives, and it's a hard one to lose, that's for sure. And two, if you want to become a better coach, and for me, a better human in regards to judgment, I would encourage you to go listen to episode 42 with Brooks Johnson. So that's the last I'm gonna say of it. I hope you, it's interesting being in the position that I am here, hosting this podcast of recording these really evergreen content. And I'm so glad that Brooks gave me the chance to get his story on wax. And now coaches in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years will be able to hear the story from him, from his lips, not just reading a Wikipedia page or whatnot. They'll be able to hear the story from him of his upbringing and how he got into coaching and just his philosophy. So love you, Brooks. I know you're always touching us in very many positive ways, and so happy to have gotten to know you, my friend. Appreciate you very much. Okay, thank you. Appreciate you guys allowing me to, I was just thinking about this weekend when I saw the news of how I knew I had a recording the very next day, and so how I was going to approach that. And so appreciate you guys allowing me to share that here with you today. So let's talk about today and today's guest. And I think we're going to learn a lot here too. I'm really excited about this. I've known today's guest for a while, but don't know him, if that makes sense. So we're going to be learning a lot, and that's one of my favorite things to do here on the podcast. So help me welcome from the head coach of Emory, the Eagles. I don't know how I didn't know this one. The Emory Eagles, the head coach. Help me welcome the wise, wonderful Mr. Linh Nguyen. Linh, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you for sitting through that. That's a little bit longer than normal intro, but something that was important and weighing on my heart, to be honest with you.
No, but I actually got to meet Brooks very early in my coaching career, and I'm just trying to remember what it was. He was honored at something in Greensboro, and I was there, and I was somehow invited to it and got to see the ceremony thing, and then there was a track meet at NCA&T after, and we were there, and so I got to sit with him and hang out with him a little bit during the meet, and just I was I was a young 20 something, didn't know anything. And so it was cool because he was such a big name, to just kind of sit with him during a meet and, kind of just talking and chatting
Yeah.
and listening to him. So
I'm glad you had that opportunity because, I wonder about guys like him. And what I mean by that is, people have such a huge impact on the sport. And, for me, I'm very hyper focused on the coaches. And like I said, he was a coach's coach, right? Like he went from coaching athletes, which he did, a phenomenal job for crying out loud, but really like doubled and tripled down on coaching education. And, he did these weekly, what they call them, PACA or whatnot, PACA calls ever since through COVID. And boy, you think about things that occur and maybe you take them for granted. When they first came out, like during COVID, everybody, we were on Zoom every night, right? Because we didn't have anything else
yeah,
to do. And he was doing those with Sue Humphreys and stuff. And it was like, oh, this is good. And then we got back into our busy lives and he kept doing them. And I wonder, I assume the listenership or watching ship viewership went down. And I think some people might kick themselves in the butt now. It's like, man, now those are done, or at least they're done with him. And, we're going to miss out on a lot of that. But I'm just, anybody who invests in coaches, track and field coaches, man, I'm always going to be a fan of. And he just seemed to, boy, like I said, double, tripled, quadrupled down and said, okay, fine. What do they say? Shuffle off this mortal coil. I'm going to pass away soon. So I'm not going to let any opportunity go by that I'm not going to give as much of my knowledge out, and then you guys do what you will. If you know Brooks,
yeah,
you do what you will with it now, but it's not going to be trapped in here. I'm gonna give it out to you. So so I love that you had a Brooks encounter and story, man. That's really
yeah,
good. I wonder, he was so prolific. I wonder how many don't have some kind. He just
right.
was everywhere all the time in those pack of calls, etc. So um, certainly, if you don't have a Brooks story, like you never met him, you are certainly missing out. Like you're don't let that happen to someone else. Like I think about the other amazing coaches that are out there. Let's just make sure we're telling their story, we're listening to their stories, and that's a lot of what this podcast is about here. And
Yeah.
so we're going to learn your story here today, Mr. Ling.
All right.
All right, my friend, let's hop right into it. So, somewhere track had to switch from like something maybe you do, assuming you were an athlete, we'll learn here in a
hmm
second, to like something like, oh, wait a minute, like this could actually be a career for me. I could actually be a coach. Where does track and field start for you?
So I started in high school with track and field. My freshman year, I think outdoor track was the first time. Freshman year was the first time I did it. I played football in the fall. Um, didn't do anything in the winter, and then ran track in the spring. Kind of repeated that same thing sophomore year, and then junior year is when I got into cross country, indoor, outdoor, and really started doing more year round.
Why try, it's easy on this podcast to assume like, oh, of course you did track. I mean, that's why you're here or whatever.
Yeah,
But you had options. If you're playing football, you had options to play maybe a baseball, a basketball, tennis, some other traditional spring type sports, or you played football to do more football, right? I mean, plenty of,
yeah.
unfortunately, I think football coaches and players just do more football during the spring. Why track? Was there a family member? You got Runner's World magazine? Why track?
No, I honestly I don't even really remember why. I played baseball growing up, little league like most people did. I mean still like baseball is a huge part of my life. I love baseball. It's probably my favorite sport. I'm an avid fan of baseball. Um and I can't even really remember
Yeah.
why I got into track. I just did. And
Where are you going to high school at? What area?
I'm from Long Island, New York.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, this may be a dumb question. So a lot of times people will tell a story and I'll be like, oh, we have a lot in common. I hate baseball. So we have zero of that. I played 1 year, fifth grade, had a zero batting average. It was like, this sucks, man. This is not a sport for me. But you grew up in Long Island. Is it safe to assume I'm either going to get this right or offend you?
Yeah.
You grew up a Yankees fan?
Mets.
I see. I knew it was like, or I
Yeah,
offended you because
yeah,
you're a Mets
yeah,
fan. Yeah, exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, most people, there are. Well, I think Long Island's fairly split, but I mean, Yankees obviously
You
the
just
more
said
storied
anywhere in New York.
franchise.
I would have just said
Yeah,
Yankee. I like, I don't know Yankees. That's all
yeah,
I know the Mets. Keith Hernandez, right? That I know that there's my
exactly.
Mets
Yeah,
history. Or Doc
yep.
Gooden, right? Yeah, yeah.
Doc, yep,
Yeah, exactly. All
yeah,
right. So you're doing track. You're the first couple of years sounds like you're just doing track because you're doing other sports, maybe as well,
yeah.
football, etc. But junior year kind of sounds like it changed. Like, oh, wait, I'm gonna do cross indoor, like maybe a little bit more of a commitment. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was getting bigger and I wasn't. So, football was, I mean, I really loved playing football and, I love being on the team and the teammates and stuff, but, I was just genetically challenged, I think, in that regard. And I do remember one day being at football practice and, seeing the cross country team running around. They were doing a workout around the fields and campus, and I was with a bunch of big stinky guys. And I was looking over there. I'm like, there's a bunch of nice looking ladies over there. What am I doing here? Like this is dumb. Like I'm getting my brains beat in and I'm just around stinky guys. Like let me go check this out. So the next year I did cross country.
How did that go?
Yeah, I was not good. I thought I was a sprinter the first few years, and even honestly, even my junior year, I didn't think I was a distance runner, and then, more became one my senior year, but I just wasn't very good in high school. I didn't train in the summer. I didn't train between seasons. I remember going into my senior year, my coach told me like, all right, like Sunday, I want you to go run for an hour. And I was like, run for an hour on a Sunday? And he's like, yeah. And I just remember thinking like, yeah, I'm like, what two TV shows am I willing to miss, you know, for a run? And I really, I really couldn't think of any. So it was, yeah, I was I would say reluctant distance runner.
Well,
So
yeah, I love that. Yeah, run for an hour. First of all, hold on. On a Sunday. Well, hold on. Wait a minute.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What do you? So did you run that hour? And
I
if
did.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. How did that? I mean, 'cause that's a lot. That's a lot for a trained athlete. Honestly, when we're talking about high
Yeah.
schoolers and stuff here, how did that feel? Like, was there a sense of accomplishment? Was there, screw this, I'm going back to football?
No, yeah, I mean, well, so that run was good. I felt good. I enjoyed it. It's funny because recently I was talking to my wife and I was, telling her about my oldest son is he's he's getting ready to go into high school, so he's gonna run cross country. So they've been having practice throughout the summer, and I was telling her how like far ahead of me he is, and I was telling her my very first cross country practice, I had to do a 3 mile loop, and I made it probably a mile and a half before I started walking, just cramps all over my stomach. And then I remember hearing like footsteps, and I turned around, like the whole varsity girls team was coming up behind me, and I'm like, oh, I gotta run. So I'm trying to run, but I couldn't, and it's like run, walk, and um, they just zoomed by me, and I was like, that was like the most embarrassing thing ever. And so that was like a big motivation for me. It was like I can't have this happening,
So you're better than me. When I was in high school, I don't know what I was, but I ended up being a hurdler, half miler kind of guy. We had a girl, Angela Williams. I'm pretty sure was her name. She ended up going to South Alabama, and she was pretty good, and I was not. And this Alabama. We used to run the boys and girls together to get the meet over, things like that. And the goal was to beat her. I rarely did. And there was no embarrassment. It was just like, man, she kicked my butt.
right?
I don't know if I didn't. I guess I cared, but and I don't want to say like, I was so progressive, Ling, that I didn't care if a girl beat. No,
Right.
I'm sure I got ribbed for it, of course, but it was like, dude, she's awesome. Like, we're in
Yeah.
little Alabama, so I was not. And same thing, I was definitely not running in the summer. I was playing football in the fall. No longer. I mean, our training was just terrible, but.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway, so you run a mile, you start running a little bit more serious. How did that translate into like it started improving, like holding
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
own, if you will?
Yeah. I think my high school coach was amazing. Like he was a great guy, a great coach. I mean, we still keep in touch.
Mhm.
Um, he's a good friend, and I think he always had this, he wanted us to do well and he wanted us to enjoy it, but he wanted us to be able to do it in college. And so he was always like, I'm going to push you a little, but I'm not going to push you too much. And just kind of, he would just tell us like, I want to leave something for your college coach to be able to work with. And so, I didn't do very much. I mean, maybe 35, maybe 40 miles a week in high
Mhm.
school, just, but I got better. I mean, I not great, but I ran like upper 430s for the mile, and it was enough to get recruited by
Yeah.
somebody. So
What do
yeah,
you, I'm gonna jump here just a little bit because you said something that made me think about someone else, a very famous high school coach that has now since passed. So your coach's philosophy would be the opposite of, say, a Joe Newton at York High School. You know, Joe, I'm gonna say was famous. You know, I coached against Joe in
yeah,
Chicago for a couple of years. That's hard to say because you know Joe just kicked everybody's butt. But
yeah,
our kid, and I didn't coach the kid. I was just with them. Did beat his kid Boris back in at the cross country state meet. So you know, it's kind of a little feather in our hat for Joe Newton.
yeah,
Anyway, he was famous for like, hey, you know, most of us are not going to go on to college, so I'm going to make you the best for your own experience. I'm going to make
right,
you the best. So they were running, you know, 100 miles per week.
yeah,
What do you think, just philosophy wise, you know, based on how you were coached and maybe your own personal philosophy today, although you're not coaching high school, of course, but
yeah.
maybe you did, and we'll get into that versus so when you think about high schoolers, coaching philosophy, what do you think about that?
They'll always ask me like, oh, do you avoid high mileage kids in recruiting or whatever?
Oh,
And
right. Yeah.
you know, I don't honestly like.
Mhm.
What I'm looking for is I'm just looking for. I mean, mileage is one piece of the puzzle, right? And I mean, I think in my opinion, if you're a good coach, like you can you can find other pieces of the puzzle to make kids better. So maybe you
Mhm.
don't have anywhere to go with mileage, but there's many other things you
Mhm.
can do. There's many other stimulus. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I get kids from all different backgrounds here, and I have everywhere I've coached. And so, when I'm in that recruiting process, I'm just looking for, okay, if this is something that's kind of been developed really well, what else hasn't been? What else can I
Mhm.
develop? So,
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah,
Okay, so you end up getting to, you know, four something in the mile. First of all, my
yeah,
mile never started with a four, so
yeah,
bravo.
yeah,
Uh, um, what are you thinking for college, and what are you more importantly, what are you thinking career wise at this point? You know, you're a 17, 18
yeah.
year old kid. I still can't believe we make kids that young think about majors and what they're going to be, but what are you thinking senior year in regards to college and what you might want to become one day?
Yeah, so I was always interested in medical stuff. So, I was big into the sciences and STEM and stuff like that. And so I wasn't sure if I wanted to do medical school, but we had this guy at our high school that an athletic trainer. I mean, this is, early 90s. So we were lucky to have an athletic trainer at our high
Yeah.
school. Most schools didn't. And he was amazing. He was awesome. And so I got really interested in that. My high school coach, one of his siblings was a PT, so I, talked to them about that. I got really interested in that, and I was like, so it was just kind of like, I was thinking athletic training, physical therapy, maybe possibly med school, something like that, and that's kind of where I was focusing, academically.
Very I'm gonna call it track coach adjacent, meaning
Yeah,
it's not
right.
coaching track, but it's human body and yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Was coaching at all, teaching coaching at all in your mind space, or all
No. No.
PT,
Yeah,
AT?
not even I didn't even even as a senior, I wasn't even really like thinking running in college. I grew up like many New Yorkers, I grew up a Notre Dame football fan. So, I wanted to go to Notre Dame. I also was a big fan of Duke basketball and Coach K. So, I was thinking of one of those two schools just academically. That's where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And then my coach started, whispering in my ear, like, oh, you should run in college. Like, you could really run. And he's like, but those two programs you
But
can't run
not
at because
there.
yeah, because you're not good. And you have to be good to run there. And so he was like, maybe you should look at some D2, some D3 schools. And so and I had some schools reaching out, some, filled some questionnaires out, stuff like that, and was in touch with some. And so I started kind of, as I'd say indoor of my senior year, I really started getting into running and I really started to enjoy it. And so that's when I was like, okay, you know what, maybe this should be part of my college experience. And so I started taking more seriously the phone calls with coaches and that process, to look at running in college.
And where'd that lead you?
Lynchburg College in Virginia.
I didn't
Yeah.
know you went to Lynchburg.
I
Is that
did, yeah.
right?
Yeah, you had Spreck on here who yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
so
have been there visiting Liberty and
mhm.
Lynchburg and was really blown away by Lynchburg's campus, man.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
really I really enjoyed it. In fact, when we were at D3 Outdoors this year, Spreck introduced me to his squad,
Hmm.
6, 7, 8 girls. And we were just talking about the campus and just like, man, it's a cool, like I love where the track and the dorms are.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's beautiful. So actually early on in the process, I was being recruited by Lycoming in college, and I used to get the two of them
Hmm.
confused.
Sure, sure.
And then I had a buddy who ran at another local high school to mine, and he was looking at schools in the South, and his dad and I were talking, and him at a meet, and he was like, "Oh, where are you looking?" And I mentioned Lynchburg, and he's like, "Well, have you visited?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, we're going to go down and we're going to visit Elon."
Mhm.
And he's like, "If you want to come, we'll drop you off at Lynchburg on the way. And, then you kind of make your own way back." And so I was like, "Yeah, that sounds
That's how we
great."
used to do
So
things.
yeah, yeah. So, in New York, you have like a midwinter recess. In February, you get like a week off of school. So,
Oh, smart.
um, my senior year was 96, and we had a huge blizzard that year. And we had like 8 to 10 foot snow drifts out on
Oof.
the east end of the island. So I hop in the car with my buddy and his dad. We drive down, they drop me off at Lynchburg, and it's like shorts and t-shirt weather, the Blue Ridge Mountains, beautiful campus. The team was fantastic, very um, very good, winning a lot of titles. I really like that. Coach Toms was the coach there, Jack Toms, who's in the actually the Coach Association Hall of Fame, and
Yeah.
um, I loved him. He was super intense and very competitive, and I loved that. And yeah, I was just like, why would I not come here? Like, it wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't at the academic level that I originally wanted to
Mm.
be.
Mhm.
But I just figured, you know what, if I go somewhere I'm really happy, and I love it, I can do well academically, and then I can get into a good grad school, and things will work out in the end. So
So you exhibited some pretty um I don't say necessarily forward thinking, but you kind of seem like I'm always thinking not just 1 year ahead, but what's 2, 3, 4? Like you were talking about colleges, and then it was like, okay, maybe Lynchburg's not the Duke and Notre Dame of academics, but if I do that, then the grad school, like
yeah, I just
that's
I just figured, I mean, I guess uh a little bit in a cocky way. I was like, well, I'll just crush it there academically. And if I come out with like a super high GPA, and I do really well on, whatever um, MCAT or GRE or
right.
whatever it is it might be, then why would a good graduate school deny me?
Hmm.
Like, so I just thought, I'll be happy there. I mean, I really liked the place. I came back really impressed and really excited about it. And I was like, if I'm happy, I'm going to be successful, right? Like
Yeah. I
that's
say
the
I think
key.
there's a real lesson there to be real frank with. There's a
Yeah.
guy on social media that talks a lot about, in regards to your profession, not this isn't track related, but just your profession and how much it pays. And, would you rather be unhappy making, say, $100,000 a year, or would you rather be really happy making 60?
Yeah.
You change your lifestyle based on the finances, but, I think a lot of us could crush it at 60,000 and be extremely happy. I
Yeah.
think, in fact, that actually, there's a lot of track coaches that make way less than that, that they're extremely happy. I still think you should be making a lot more, to be real
Right.
frank. But I think you should have both, be happy and financially well off.
Right.
Okay, so a lot of times when people are setting up their story, like you are here, Ling, hey, I'm going to be happy. These are my words, not yours. Sacrificing the academic side, but
Yeah.
because I know I'll love it and all these kind of things. And then, there's like the big letdown. I get there and it just wasn't what I thought, or something like that. Or the first winter came and it was kind of cold, not 8 feet
Yeah.
snow, but kind of cool. What's it for you, Ling? You got down there and
Yeah, I got down there. I had another I had another experience, my first practice, much like the first one in high school. I was I mean, I'd driven down from New York that day. I thought we were just showing up and doing like meetings and stuff like that. We showed up, we did our meetings, and coach was like, "Okay, we're going for a run." So I mean, I got out of the car after a 10-hour drive from New York, sat in this meeting, then we went for a run. Went on some trails. I was way behind everybody. I got lost. I had
oh
some townie kids teasing me and throwing rocks at me because I was so far behind everybody.
no,
Um,
are you serious?
oh yeah, oh yeah, we were on
I
this.
mean, this sounds like the world's worst first day, for crying
Oh, it
out
was
loud.
awful. It was awful. Yeah, we were on this trail called Blackwater Creek, which is in Lynchburg, and it goes along the creek. And so we got out. I got turned around. I got lost. Like I said, I was way behind everybody, and I'm coming back, and there's this apartment complex on the other side of the creek, and there's like, probably 6 to 8 little kids over there, probably 10 to 12 years old, and they're looking at me, and I'm clearly in pain, and they're like, "Oh, your crew came by here about 20 minutes ago. Ha ha, you're so slow." And I was just like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." And yeah, then they started chucking rocks at me from across the stream. So I was like, "Man, this is motivation to pick it up at least."
Welcome
So
to Lynchburg.
yeah, yeah. But after that day, so that night we went to my coach's house. He had a cookout, and we all went over there and cooked out. His wife cooked out for us, and we just hung out with the team, and our team that year we had a fifth year senior, and then we had 9 freshmen,
Wow.
and that was basically our cross country team on the men's side, and we just clicked, like we just all clicked right away, and it was amazing, and all 9 of us didn't make it all 4 years, but one of my very best friends in the world is one of those guys, and so yeah, I loved it. I mean, I loved the school, the people, the team. I love the coach. I mean, I had an amazing time there.
Did you ever go back and beat up those kids? No, don't
No.
answer that. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Was in our mind, just assume somehow you did. So what did you end up majoring in? And does coaching during these 4 or 5 years, probably four for you,
Or yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Overachiever. Nowadays, if it's 4 years, you're an overachiever,
Yeah.
in our books. Did coaching, I'm going to go with the assumptive. When did coaching during college
Yeah.
start clicking, or did it?
So we had a major there called like gosh, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was basically like, you know, human sciences type of thing, right? So I was taking that, and I had essentially a double emphasis. It was like athletic training and exercise physiology. And
Sure.
so I was studying both of those while I was there. I still thought I was going to be an athletic trainer. I did that whole thing. I graduated 4 years, and then back then you had like accredited programs and non-accredited, and we were non-accredited for athletic
Mhm.
training, and so you had to get like 1,200 hours of like work in, and since I was competing 3 seasons a year, I didn't. So senior year I'm crunching it all in, and as I'm doing that I'm like, I don't know if I like this, so I decided to take a gap year and stay in Lynchburg, and the head athletic trainer, they needed a GA for athletic training. She's like, why don't you be a GA, you can get your hours, and then you can sit for the licensure exam at the end of
Mhm.
this year. And I was like, I don't want to go to school this year. I want to just, chill. So she's like, well, just audit a few classes and you don't have to do anything. So that's what I did. So I was an athletic trainer for field hockey in the fall, and then I worked with track in the winter and spring, and I was volunteering, like at the same time, volunteer coaching with the track team, just helping out recruiting and driving vans and doing stuff like that. And I learned during that year that I absolutely hated athletic training, and there was no way that I was ever going to do that for my career. So I was still super interested in the exercise physiology part, so I decided to pursue a master's in that.
And I haven't coached in, say, I've been here 18 nights. So, oh, God, it's almost 20 years now. Gosh, in 20 years. But I do remember, through all my recruiting, athletic training was a very popular, I'll call it wannabe major. Like a lot of kids,
Yeah,
like, hey, what do you want to major in? Oh, athletic training. And I think a lot of it because it's like, oh, it's athletic, and some of them don't even think about all the other things that you could do inside of athletics, whether it's administration, coaching, sale, those kind of
right.
things. So there's a lot of athletic training. I do wish kind of like, you took this gap year at the end of 4 years. I almost wish there was like an intro gap year of like, oh, cool, you want to be an athletic trainer or insert any other major. Cool, let's go do it for a year and
Yeah.
then come into college and pick a major. Like don't do all the education and then figure out, holy crap, this isn't really what I wanted to do.
Right.
Now,
And I was lucky to have that, the exercise physiology side of it as well. So,
right.
that helped me. I was able to then go like apply to ex-phys programs for grad school,
Hmm.
and I had the
Hmm.
background for it. And as an undergrad, I never thought about coaching. Probably closest I got was I don't remember if it was my junior or senior year, our assistant distance coach, Chase, our head coach, he would coach men's cross country, but then he wasn't a distance guy or a distance coach originally. So then in track, he coached the hurdlers and the jumpers. and our women's cross country coach would coach all the distance runners in track. And so I forget, it was either my junior or senior year, we got a new assistant coach who was an alum, and he came in and he was talking about workouts and what they were supposed to do, and I was like, that's not right. Like you're wrong. And so we we had, it was probably very rude on my part, but we had an argument at practice like over what the purpose of the workouts were. And I was like, I'm just telling you from class, like what I learned, like this is wrong. And so he was like, okay, well, if you prove me wrong, I'm happy to be wrong and whatever. So the next day I remember bringing my ex-phys textbook down and I gave it to him and I was like, you need to read these chapters. Here it is. And he did. And then he came back. He's like, you're right. I was wrong. And, you know, whatever. So I don't know.
Wow.
Maybe that was like the seed of it. I don't know. But I consciously had no thoughts of coaching at that time.
That's an interesting story on a lot of aspects. There's probably coaches right now listening that they either shudder that that would ever happen or have had it happen, where a kid
Yeah.
tells them they're wrong. Especially, I shouldn't say especially, we hear about it a lot in today's world of the social media. Hey coach, these guys are doing this at this school or whatever. So there's one part of that. And then, so if that was the only part of the story, it'd be like, wow, that's, I mean, there's a little bit of audacity on your part. I hope you would
Yeah.
see that as well. You're the
Oh, for
the
sure.
athlete and he's the coach and all those kind of things.
I'd tell me to take a hike if I
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, good. Because I was going to ask what would
oh,
happen or has
100%. Yeah.
On the other side, though, I have a lot of respect for that coach. Didn't immediately say take a hike and
Yeah.
said, "All right, if you can prove it, we'll consider it." And then listen, reads the
Hmm.
chapters or whatever, considers it, and then says, "Okay, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I need to incorporate more of this or all of it, whatever." Like there's something to be said about that in regards to like that's its own slippery slope, of course, as far as like you can't be the read and just move your training program at the whim of whatever kid comes up to you on
Right.
Monday or Tuesday. But I do like the aspect of like, hey, I'm a learner until the day I die. So if you got some information, I'll consider it. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. That's a
Yeah.
really interesting story.
And it wasn't like I wasn't arguing against doing the workout. I was just arguing over what he thought the workout was accomplishing,
And I,
basically.
and I wonder how was your approach? Because that also is a lot. It's one thing to go to a coach and say you're wrong. That's one
Yeah.
way of doing it. There's another way of coming to and saying, hey, I studied this stuff. What did you major in? Hey, well, I studied this, and I'm confused because my textbook says something different. I'm kind of there's different
Yeah.
ways of approaching. How did you approach it like the jerk, or did you approach it
Oh
like
yeah, I was definitely I did not. I mean, I was a young, brash Long Island
oh
kid. Like
yeah, sure, sure.
I ruffled a lot of feathers as an undergrad.
Wow.
So, but he like so that coach's name is Jeff Fedorko, and he was, like I said, he was an alum of the program. So I'd actually met him a few times before, and he came to coaching from working on Capitol Hill. And so it was a complete change for him. An amazing dude, like just became one of the best coaches I ever had.
Wow.
And after that he went, I remember that summer he went, so it must have been my junior year, because that summer I remember him going to level one class and coming back and being like, you know, Ling, let me tell you what I learned. And so we start sitting down and we were talking about like, the science of it, because he had no physiology background. So he's like, tell me about this, what you're learning in class, and this is what I learned at level one and stuff like that. And so he was just like high energy, just really excitable, but humble guy. And, you know, and he just dove right into it. When I gave him that book, he kept it for a while. I was like, I was done with the class, so I didn't need it, but he kept it for a while and he really poured over it. And, credit to him, like he probably should have kicked me off the team or suspended me or something. Like it wasn't a very contentious argument, but it was just like, hey man, I don't think this is doing what you think it's doing. And he's like, yeah, it is. And I was like, no, it's not. And, so it wasn't contentious and it wasn't like out in front of everybody. It was just the two of us, but
Oh, okay, that was
yeah,
gonna be part of my question too. How
yeah.
did you approach it in the sense of in front of the team and try
It
to
was
make it
after
yeah,
practice.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
after practice one day, and I
That's
just came
key,
up
I
to him
think.
and
I
I was just
really
like,
do.
"Hey, I don't think this is doing what you think it's doing." You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I was like, "I'm not saying it's a bad workout, but if you think you're accomplishing something, you're accomplishing something else. So I don't know
yeah,
what that means for you in your plan."
yeah.
And so, yeah, we became really good friends, and and he coached me even like for a year or two after college, and so the relationship got really strong. But it was, when I look back on it, like when I was taking those classes, I was always thinking like, what is this doing when I'm running? And then when I was training, I was thinking about the stuff I'd learned and like what changes maybe it was were happening like, inside my body from the training and stuff like that. So
Were
it
you
was
like
it was
on
super
a
interesting to me.
you're like on a long run, you're like, oh man, my mitochondria are getting
Yeah,
stronger. Oh, you're such a
100%.
dork. I love it.
Total nerd. Total nerd. Yeah.
Not capillaries right
100%.
now, or
Yeah. 100%. That's what I was
that's
doing. And
all I know about distance running, what it does to your body right there.
yeah,
Mitochondria and capillaries. I'm done. I'm out. I'm out.
yeah,
That's hilarious, my friend. I love that.
yeah,
You said he became one of the best coaches you ever had. It obviously, I should say, it feels obvious to me that it wasn't the coach and education side. Like he came knowing everything, and that really,
yeah.
spurred me to know exercise physics even more. What was it like when you look back now? Why did you say that? What ended up making him one of the best coaches you ever had?
I think he just like I had a bad slump at one point in my college career, and I came in kind of, sucking out of high school, and then I had a really good freshman year because I think I just ignorance was bliss and I was just running and not knowing anything. And then, then the weight of expectations kind of hit me the year after that. And, he was a guy that was able to like pull me aside and be like, you're not approaching this the way you should approach it, right? Like you're trying to like, I remember coming back sophomore year with expectations and being like, I got to be so good and I got to be the top guy and I got to do all this stuff, and it just crushed me and I was running terribly. And he was somebody that just could recognize and be like, hey man, like you're not somebody who needs to be super serious before a race. You don't need to get in the zone. Like you need to like talk to people and be loose and and be yourself and and stuff like that. And so he just got to know me really well, which I liked. And then it was like he could say something and I'd think about it and be like, yeah, you're right. Like, his interpretation of me from the outside. And so he just connected really well with
Hmm.
people. He was a very enthusiastic guy. Like I remember in workouts, he would get fired up, and my teammate and I were doing this workout at a park in Lynchburg, and we were having a really good workout. And we were on the last rep, and we came by him. I think it was like they were mile reps, and we came by him 800 in, and we were nailing it. And he just got so excited and he's screaming. And I remember just seeing his clipboard fly. And next thing I know, he's like on our shoulder, just like pumping and just running and just being like, yeah, yeah, just screaming, and it just fired us. Like he got so excited that he jumped in the last rep. And you know you buy into a guy like that.
Yeah.
Like that guy's bought into you
All right.
100%. And so you
Yeah.
buy into a guy like that.
They say coaching is art and science, and maybe it should be art, science, and culture, but that's a great proof that it takes all of it, right? Like if that guy had more of the science part, what in the world could he have been coaching? But he certainly seems like he had maybe the art and the culture
Yeah.
side of it. And maybe you've seen other people who have, they're tons in the science, but no inspiration to run for that person. It's
Right.
it's a real unique combination. And then add in a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds on the college side and how their personalities mesh or don't mesh with that at all. That's really interesting. So
Yeah.
I'm still not really hearing track coaching. I'm hearing some servant leadership. You talked about, I helped drive the buses and,
Mm.
hold some clipboards or things like that. So I'm hearing some like, oh, I want to give to my team, after I finished up my undergrad, and you're doing the gap year, auditing some classes. I'm still not hearing like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a
Yeah.
track coach.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
So I mean, spoiler alert, you became a track
Yeah.
coach. So
Right. Right.
keep us going, keep us
Yeah.
walking.
So then I got really, like I said, I started looking into exercise physiology grad programs.
Right, right.
There was a professor at UNC Greensboro that was probably one of the top three authorities in the world on oxidative stress and muscle soreness and antioxidant supplementation. And so I applied to the program, hoping to work with him and do some research with him. And um, I don't know if I got lucky or what, but like he would only have two PhD students and two master's students at any time. The year I applied, both his master's students positions were open, and I he called me and he was like, "Come down. I want you to come down and interview." So it was a 2 hour drive, so I drove down to Greensboro. He ended up being this little Jewish guy from Brooklyn who ran in college, ran in high school, was big into running. We just hit it off, we New York together, we had the running together. The interview was more like just us hanging out. And so he accepted me as a student, so I went down there to start master's in ex-phys. My plan was I went on thesis track. So my plan was to go do some research, write a thesis, go get my PhD and get into to research and teaching.
Is there any, like, I always wonder sometimes about, um, I just lost my train of thought. I want to say nervousness, intimidation. Like, you just talked about how, smart this dude was. You're obviously very smart. You obviously, I'm going to say this in probably maybe a different way than maybe most people say. You want to use him. You want to learn from him. You want to use
Mhm.
his knowledge. Is there any intimidation factor of like, yeah, but this guy, I mean, he sounds like a genius, honestly. Was there
He
any,
is, he is, yeah.
yeah, was there any of that? Or was it just like, all right, man, I know I'm here and he's here knowledge wise. And guess what? My job is to try to close that gap.
Yeah, honestly, I just didn't think about it. Like I
Yeah.
just we just hit it off, like, and so the other master's student that came in with me, she was actually a track and field athlete as well. She was a hurdler. She went to DePaul in Indiana,
Yeah.
and she came in, and you know, he was all New York. Like this guy was all Brooklyn, right? And he would make fun of us. He would be sarcastic, and I would just give it back to him,
Right.
right? And she was like, "How can you talk to him like that? He's our professor.
Right.
He basically holds our academic future in his hands and stuff like that." And I was like, well, he expects it. He expects he's from New York. Like New Yorkers, you give it, you take it. That's the way it is. And she was Midwest girl, just
Yeah.
super nice.
No,
And she's like,
right.
I
Not at
can't
all.
do it. I was
Yeah.
like, one time when he comes in here, he says something sarcastic to you, just give it right back to him. And she's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And so she was stressed you know, all the 2 years that we were there. And
Yeah.
I'm just not a person that stresses. So I just rolled with it.
What, so when you're doing, because you're on the academic side here of,
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it track and field, distance running, but are you involved in track during this?
So what happened was I, you know, I,
You know what I'm saying?
I was unhappy with my college career and how it ended. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I still got something in me, so I'm going to keep running.
Hmm.
So, you know, Fed, that coach I was talking about, he agreed to keep coaching me. So I went down there, and so I reached out to the coach at Greensboro, and I was like, hey, I'm coming down for a master's program. I'm running myself. Um, if you'd like, I could be a volunteer coach for you. I'm happy to be a workout donkey. Just throw me out there. The other guys can just draft off me, whatever. I'd like to train with them if I could and stuff like that. And so I met with him and he agreed, like, yeah, you can be a volunteer coach for me. And so when I went down there, I was starting the master's program and starting being a volunteer coach for the team there. And so I did that for my first year. I did both of those things, and I had an assistantship to pay for school. And then the second year I was there, his assistant coach left in the middle of September, and she went to take a head coaching job at the Merchant Marine Academy. And they were trying to figure out what to do, and and they were like, he was like, "Well, Ling's here, and he's here for the rest of this year because the second year of his master's program." And I was working an assistantship in the writing center to pay for housing and stuff. And he's like, "Let's just make him interim for the rest of the year. Then he'll graduate. Once he graduates, then it'll be summer, it'll be hiring season, and I can hire." So they offered me that, and I took it, and I was like, well, now I one less thing on my plate, and I can still make the same amount of money, and it's something that's fun. So I did that, and this is where things start get really like complicated and interesting. So his name is Dan Dashalet. He was a great guy. Ran at Georgetown. Um, and then was coaching at Greensboro. So Dan is the head coach. I'm now the interim assistant coach.
Right.
And the plan was, like I said, I was finishing my master's that year. I was going to go on to a PhD program, and he would hire an assistant. And they wanted, there was only two coaches there, so they wanted ideally a male and a female. So
Mhm.
so I'm interim, and then then 9/11 happens, and Dan is a Marine Reserve, and we go to war, and Dan gets called into active duty. So then the administration was kind of like, now we got an interim assistant, right? And head coach. So they were like, well, we'll interview and hire an interim head, and that interim head will be the interim head coach. Ling will be the interim assistant for the rest of the year. Then at the end of the year, Ling will graduate. He'll leave. Dan will come back from active duty. Dan will be the head coach, and that interim head will go down to assistant coach.
Perfect.
Perfect. So they hire a lady named Rochelle Roberts, who had coached at Alabama. She's a very good runner at Indiana University. It was like a 4:30 miler. Unfortunately, she had Susie Hamilton in her conference at the same time. So, you know, but she was an amazing runner herself, coached at Alabama. So she came over and became the interim head that year, and I was the interim assistant. That year ended, and I kind of liked coaching more than I liked being in, a biochem lab all day. And so I was like, maybe I'll do this instead. And I remember talking to my wife, and who was not my wife at the time, but she was like, we knew where we were going, we were engaged, and she was like, look, I think you should do coaching. Like, I think this is where you belong. She's like, I don't think you should, go get your PhD. I don't think you should do anything else. Like, you need to be a coach. And she's like, and I was like, yeah, but they don't make much. They're away a lot, whatever. And she was like, I'll do whatever I need to do so that you can be a coach. Because she's like, I think that's where you belong. So, um, it was nice to have that backing, right, of the most important person. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I stuck with it. So then Dan wasn't back. Um, they didn't know what was going to happen, so they were like, to me and Rochelle, will you guys stay on in the same positions for another year? So we said, yeah, sure. So we stayed on. Well, halfway through that fall, Dan came back from active duty, and so then there was three of us, right? So we had both had that contract for that year, and he came back in from military duty. You can't obviously fire somebody, so suddenly they had three of us, and there was a little bit of, I don't want to call it power struggle, but there was some clashing between the two of them,
Sure.
right? And I
I
was
mean,
kind of stuck
right?
in the middle.
Like,
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I was stuck in the middle, and I was kind of like, hey, look, I'm just the guy that's here for another year. That's it. And
It's almost like, don't fight mommy and
yeah,
daddy.
right, exactly, yeah. So so we went through that year with the three of us, and then at the end of the year, the administration decided that none of us had contracts in the year, so they had to figure something out, and they decided, what, they liked the way Rochelle did things, and they went with her as the head coach, and she asked me to stay as the assistant coach, so I did. Um, yeah,
Yeah, of course there was something going on there, awkwardness, tension, power struggle, right? Because,
yeah,
and I think that really shows like having a clear, defined path, how important that is. So you had that when it was just you and her.
hmm,
Uh, the plan was mucked up, not by Dan. Dan didn't, purposely show up. I'm gonna call it a semester later.
yeah,
It's just how it happened, and that changes. I mean, that just changes it. And then, it's hard to sit down and say, okay, well, here's how we're actually going to do it. And you had to have yeah, I can't even imagine the kind of leader. I'm not sure that leader kind of exists in your administration to say, okay, boys and girls, let's all sit down. Here's how we're going to do it. And, you can
right.
either do it or not, you get to make your own decisions. But yeah, that seems like that would just be, I mean, like, I kind of feel a little bit for the kids. I feel like they possibly had to suffer a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, they did. And Dan and Rochelle are both amazing. They're both awesome. And I'm still in touch with both of them to this day. And they actually got along, but they were just so different in their
Mm,
styles and the way they did things. And I think, I just think none of the three of us really knew what our place was supposed to be, and
mhm.
none of the three of us really kind of understood what the dynamic should be. And so, except for me, I was like, I'm number three. I know that, right? Like I know where I am. But so I think everybody wanted to go in the same direction, wanted to do the same thing. It was just like, we're kind of chugging along doing our thing. All of a sudden you get a third person thrown into it, and it's like you got to figure it out on the fly. And I think the three of us just didn't do a good job, maybe a super great job of figuring out on the fly. I don't think there were no, like, knockdown dragouts, no,
Right, right.
no hard feelings or anything. It was just like, eventually it just kind of figured out that this was the kind of the way to go.
Doesn't sound like there was much you could do to help, but sounds like there's a lot you could have done to hurt, and you at least stayed out of that side of it. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna do no damage that there is. I'm not sure I can band-aid anything up though.
right.
So how are you as you're transitioning from this call it academic side of
Mhm.
endurance and endurance study to coaching. How, we talked about coaching is art and science. You seem to have the science down, at least, in this early of
Yeah.
a career. How are you, I'm gonna say, transitioning to the coaching side, the, meeting with athletes, goal setting, recruiting, um, putting together a game plan on how the cross country meet's going to go, all these billions of
Yeah.
other things that, more than I do on this, that you have to go through, race plan strategies, et cetera. How are you learning and adapting to that side of things?
So at that time, I wasn't doing any actual writing of workouts or anything like that,
Mhm.
and so I just kind of threw myself into like trying to build relationships, trying to get to know the athletes. I was still pretty young,
Right.
so I felt like I could relate to a lot of them, and so I threw myself into recruiting. I mean, I had nothing going on, outside of that. So, I was on the phone all the time recruiting, and um, I wish I could remember who it was. I feel like this is really bad to not remember this, but somebody I was talking to about it, I was like, look, I'm not writing any workouts. Like, how am I going to get better at
Mhm.
coaching if I'm not writing workouts? And they were like, here's what you do. Like, these other two coaches are doing all the workouts, they're writing all that stuff. They were like, get yourself, like a composition book and write your own workouts. And it was like, gosh, I can't remember who it was, but I remember he was just like, write the workouts as if you're writing the workouts for the team, but just don't say show them to anybody. Don't, like, obviously, you're the assistant. Your coach is assistants to make the head coach's job easier. That's it.
Mhm.
So don't show anybody the workouts because it'll be, might be different than what they're doing. Um, don't try to undermine, just keep them for yourself. So just plan out the season, plan out the workouts for yourself, and then even though you're not applying them to anybody, you're having the experience of writing the workouts and going through the season, and saying, oh well, this is how this meet went, and this is how the kids are feeling now, so this is how I
Mhm.
would do the workout. And so I guess kind of just made workouts for nobody for that, that year there. Um and then was just, I was doing op stuff, really. I'm setting up travel, I'm setting up hotels, I'm doing the travel, I'm connecting with the kids, I'm recruiting, I'm doing all that stuff.
When we talk about athletes and we ask them, how are you getting better at your craft? How are you becoming a better shot putter, distance run, 5K person, et cetera? They would say, I go to practice, right? So I'm doing the workouts, things like that. I would have had a hard time, and I've been, I don't know, this may be an overstatement. This may, I don't know. Someone might correct, wrap my knuckles for this one. I have been around a lot of coaching conversations. And I mean coaches before they were coaches and they became coaches, coaches that have coached for 40 years. I think I would have had a hard time describing what does a coach do for practice, not how they conduct their practice, but how do you become a better coach by practicing? What would a coach do? This is a really interesting example, this composition book and
Yeah.
writing workouts based on, okay, you don't have control over, well, I don't know if you ever have control over what the athletes feel from a workout. You're trying to,
Hmm.
make the body, but you don't know when the kid's staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning and all those kind of things. So you're evaluating based on the past workout that you didn't write. Okay, I would prescribe this workout the next, and you're writing it down. How did that, again, looking back now, we have 2020, we have hindsight, things like that. What kind of effect did that have when you actually started implementing workouts? Was this a good thing? Was this just a passing time thing?
No,
I'm trying to
I
I'm
think it
trying
was
to I'm trying to
great.
get to, if I should, like, if this should be something like other coaches should, like, start putting into practice.
Yeah.
Like, I think about GAs, I hate the term stopwatch holder and all that kind of stuff. First
Yeah.
of all, every coach holds a stopwatch. I don't understand this whole that whole naming thing of, it's supposed to be a derogatory thing. But for a
Right.
coach who's not actually writing workouts, they're implementing someone else's workouts, which there's a lot to learn from that, by the way.
Yep.
I'm wondering if, like, this should be like a standard operating procedure, if you will, of like, hey, get you a comp book, and writing workouts, and the reasoning behind writing those workouts is one of the most important things you can do as coaches. There's a lot of others. Uh, like, I'm trying to figure that part out. Tell me about
Yeah.
now hindsight with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super glad I did it like that. So that next year then, when, it was just Rochelle and I, we went through the fall together, and she was writing the workouts and I'm just supporting. And then we get to track season, and she was like, okay, you're gonna have a few athletes of your own now. And so she was like, here, like I start off with two women. Like these two women you're gonna coach these two women. And so I felt like I had already been writing workouts, even though nobody had been running them. I felt like I was already assessing how seasons were going, how workouts and races were going. I was already assessing those things. I was talking to the athletes about how they felt, so I knew that. So I was doing all that and then writing a workout based on that stuff,
Hmm.
right? And so once I started coaching them, I didn't feel like, oh, this is my first time writing a workout. Oh my gosh, right? Like I had it and I even used it and referenced it. I still have the composition book, and I
Hmm.
still, I don't reference it much anymore, but I could if I wanted to. And so then I got, so then I have these two athletes that I'm coaching on my own, and I'm like super excited because I'm like, this is the first time I'm going to get to see how it
Hmm.
works. And so I had one workout in the morning and one workout in the afternoon, and then we would alternate, like, it worked out well with their class schedules, whatever, but I would do that. And then, you know, they were both running the same events, but I would have one do a workout in the morning. And, so I'd write a workout, I'd have the workout, implemented, and then I would see how she handled it. And sometimes I would be like, ooh, that wasn't good, or we need to change this. So I change it for the afternoon.
Hmm.
And they would be like, hey, why are we doing different workouts? And I was like, well, you're different people, you need different things. And really, because I wanted them to be bought in, but really I was experimenting. i was
Right.
i was trying to figure out, like, is this good or is that good or whatever. And so I don't think that, luckily they both got much better and they both ran much faster, than what they came in at, and I think had successful careers. But um it was definitely like me, I guess, cutting my teeth, so it was a good transition from like writing these workouts that nobody ever would run to then I have these two athletes that I'm coaching, and now I got to figure out, like, really how does it get implemented. And so I did it separately with them.
It makes me remember a study that I'm probably going to butcher, where they were doing. There was a study. It would have been a study you would have done in the academic side of it. They were doing leg extension, leg lifts, leg extensions, and like, there was a control group. I think the control group did nothing. There was a group that, did, let's call it 3 sets of 10, and they measured, size of the muscle, all that kind of, all the
Hmm.
stuff like that. And then there was another group. I thought there was two more groups. There was at least one more group that when they were doing the leg lifts, they were instructed to also visualize the muscle getting bigger. And I thought there was another group that they didn't do the leg lifts, but like they did the
Just
same time
visualize.
period. Yeah, they did the
Yeah.
visuals of those. And I remember the way I remember it is the group that did the leg extensions and were told to think about the muscle growing saw like I don't remember, 3%, 6%, whatever, but saw more muscle gain, muscle mass gain. And so it makes me think about this composition book. Like, this is you working out your muscle without the actual implementation of it at this point. But like, how else are you supposed to get to writing workouts if you don't do that? Like that,
Do it.
this, I don't know,
Yeah.
I've never heard this before, and this just seems like really like practical, like, I love simple things too. This is not like,
Mhm.
go to the Himalayas and,
Right.
it's like, hey, just go get a book and just start writing workouts.
Right.
And you'll adjust as you see what happens in the other workouts that you're implementing, what the kids do, and you'll come back and adjust. And again, that practice of like what's going on in your brain to the pen in your hand of writing it out. Like, this just seems like really practical, like coaching, how to practice to become a coach or something,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it was huge for me. It was very pivotal for me. And so I feel really bad that I can't remember who told me to
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah,
it.
yes. Yeah, that guy right now is screaming, dude,
Right.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
told you
That was
that. How
me.
in the world? Yeah, we'll hear about it on social. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, yeah.
So keep us going then. So how
Okay.
this really, I mean, I'm gonna say unique because I don't know that I've heard of all, two coaches on staff being interim, the third former full timer comes back. Like, this
Yeah.
is a really kind of a weird mixture staff here going on.
Yeah. So then it's Rochelle's the head coach and I'm the assistant coach, and interim tags are all removed, and it's just the two of us. And, I'm thinking, well, I'm done with my master's degree now. Like, Greensboro is a distance only program. We didn't have any other events. And I'm like, there's just not enough athletes to go around. So I'm like, I think, to progress in my career, I need to go somewhere else, right? I need to make a move. So I'm applying for jobs like I mean, every job that comes open, I'm applying for, and I'm getting nothing. Like, I mean, if 40 jobs came open, I applied to 40 jobs and I didn't get anything. Um, and so I was starting to question, like, is is this maybe this isn't for me? Maybe like I can't, like I was even applying for GA jobs. I was like, I'll do a second master's,
Wow.
just to do something different. And so I got to the point where I thought that was like, yeah, it's not going to happen, right? This isn't the thing for me because if I can't get a job, then, you know, it doesn't make sense. So then I started making plans to go to med school, and I was like, I gotta, I gotta do this, and so I was making plans to go to med school. I was going to finish out that school year, and then the next year I was gonna quit, and I was going to go to med school. And Rochelle came back from Thanksgiving, and she pulled me aside, and she's like, I got engaged over Thanksgiving. And I was like, awesome, that's great, and her husband was back, or her fiance was back in Alabama where she had come from. And she's like, well, I'm leaving because, I'm going to go be where he is. And so I was like, oh, what's that mean for me? And she's like,
Interim.
interim, right? She's like, this is your opportunity. Like, they'll probably make you interim. And so she told the AD, and he was like, please stay for the school year. And she's like, no, we're not going to stay for the school year. And he's like, well, how long would you be willing to stay? Like, first she was like, end of first semester. And he was like, how about the end of indoor? And so they came to an agreement that she would stay through the end of indoor. So she stayed through the end of indoor, and then she left. And then for outdoor, I became the interim head coach. And I was told, hey, you're the interim. We're going to advertise the job at the end of the school year. You're welcome to apply. We're not giving you any guarantees. Do the best job you can now. That's the best way to help yourself. And so I just threw myself headfirst into, I went from 2 athletes to the whole team.
Right.
That outdoor season, I just threw myself into it, and I was like, um, the only thing I can do is the best job I can do. And so I did that. And then the end of the school year came, and I talked to the AD, and he was like, if you want the job, apply for it like everybody else, and we'll figure it out. So I did. They interviewed me, and they gave me the job. So yeah.
I don't know if you consider yourself a good storyteller or not, but I'm literally on the edge because I'm like, I
Yeah.
have no clue what's going to go on next. Actually, he's not getting the job. He's not
Yeah.
getting the job.
Yep.
By the way, I have said and heard the word interim more in this
Hmm.
past 30 minutes than I have probably the last 30 years, to be real frank with you. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So you got the job.
So I got the job.
So you
Yeah.
go from I can't sniff a
Volunteer.
job,
Yeah.
yeah, applying everywhere, quote unquote,
Right.
no one wants me, to a head job,
Yeah.
like the head job, like take interim off of the title now.
Yeah. And I think that year I was 27 going into 28. So I was the youngest head coach in Division One at the time, when that happened. And so I was very excited, and then there was like a lot of like excitement, and then there was a moment of like, oh crap, like
Reality.
I got to do it now. Like,
Yeah.
like I've always been a very confident person. I've never really been somebody that doubts myself no matter what. And so I was like, well, I'm going to be a good head coach. Like, you should hire me. And then they hired me. I'm like, oh, well, I better back it up now, like I better back it up.
So you're a pretty prepared guy. Like I said, we're learning this composition book thing, which
Yeah.
I'm really interested. Like I'm gonna have to have more conversations about the practice of becoming a coach. That's really interesting to me. What did you do as you were preparing after as you're interviewed and waiting for a decision? I feel like you're the kind of guy who's already going to start preparing for that job, whether you get it or not. What were you doing to prepare? And then you got the job. What are you doing to prepare to become the best head coach you can be?
Yeah. So I think, that it was really interesting that spring, that outdoor season where I was interim. I feel like most of the kids were pretty bought into me already, but one of our best kids on the team was absolutely not bought in.
Mhm.
And we had like immediately as soon as I became the head coach, we had issues. I'd say a power struggle a little bit, and so it
When
actually
you be
resulted
when you became the interim head
when I
coach,
became
or
the interim. Yeah, when I
so
became the
right
interim
off the bat,
right off the bat.
there's
Yeah.
tension. What do you do? That's a hey, this is a good question because I don't know that this is all that rare. I mean, we can do all we want in recruiting to get to know a kid and invite the kids that you feel like would mesh with you in your program to to your school. But we all get new jobs, so we're always coming into kids who already have their own ideas and have had a coach for maybe 4 years or whatnot. What do you do when you have a kid that's just
Yeah.
clash? And I think you said your best kid. I
The
don't know
best
that, that
kid.
I
Yeah,
don't
the
know that
best
that should
kid.
necessarily play into it, but
Right.
no matter what, it does. Psychologically, it plays into it. What do you do?
So it was kind of a situation where like I want to practice on my own, I want to lift on my own, I want to do this, and I'm like, you know, I'm a team guy. Like in high school, it was team. At Lynchburg, it was team. And, I wanted any team I coached to be about the team, right? And so I was like, no, you're gonna do things the way everybody else does them, and when everybody else does them, you're gonna be part of the team. It doesn't matter how good you are. Like, no individual is bigger than the team, right? And so it led to a very big, you know, issue. I was lucky because I had three administrators that were like amazing, three of my biggest mentors, and I just leaned on them. I went to them. I said, "Hey, look!" Like as soon as it started happening, I went to them, like my sport administrator, another deputy AD and the AD, and I was like, "This is what's going on." And I need help and guidance, and they helped me and guided me through it, and that it ended up. So when I became the head coach, then the struggle kind of lasted through the next year with this kid, and then that kid ended up actually leaving the team. He was presented an opportunity to say, "Hey, look, here are the requirements to be on the team. You choose to meet the requirements, or you choose to not be on the team." And he chose not to be on the team and ended up transferring. Um, but the great thing was that I had the backing of my administration the entire way. I think because I came to them early, I communicated with them. I needed guidance, so I asked for it, and they gave it to me, and they were like, I walked them through my thinking on things, and they were like, we agree with you, and so, um, so I think it worked out for the best. It was a tough thing to go through as a young coach, as a first time head coach, and
Yeah.
but like I look back on that and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I went through that. Like at the time, I
Mhm.
was like, this sucks, but I'm so glad I went through it because it just like right off the bat, it just prepared me. It prepared me, and I was like, okay, this is something I've got to be ready for interpersonally, professionally, like in all these different ways. I learned the value of, taking notes in meetings and, CYA that way and,
Mm.
and all that stuff. Like I learned all of that stuff right away. And and so I think it was actually in the end of the day it was a good thing for me.
Did you have any you talk about your administration. I'm so glad to hear your administration was supportive, listened to you, and then supported based on hearing the facts, if you will. Um, I know things get sensationalized, and I hear today like, oh, administrators don't have any coaches' backs and things like that. And I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I think there's story. I think there's certainly maybe that's true in some administrations, and that probably was true back then in some administrations. But I am glad to hear that part. As you're going through these tough times, and you're right, if you're coaching in your 20th year and you have this, that's a thing to go through emotionally and socially to go through in your career. You're doing this right off the bat. You're is their first time head coach and interim head coach during that season. Did you have any mentors to call? Anybody? Hey, Johnny, how did you do this? Well, here's the situation I'm in. What advice do you have? You've been a coach for 15 or whatever. Anybody to
Yeah.
call and bounce ideas and thoughts off of?
I didn't know. And I think like, the two head coaches that I worked for were both out of coaching at this point and on with different parts of their lives. And so I didn't bother them with it. I hadn't worked under anybody else. I hadn't gone like, a GA somewhere or whatever.
Right.
And probably looking back on it now, the reason why I didn't get any replies to any of the jobs I applied for is because I hadn't had opportunity to network at that time. I didn't know anybody in the coaching profession at that time.
Mhm.
So, I didn't I guess running wise or track and field wise, I didn't have anybody. I leaned on the other coaches in our athletic department. We had, an amazing soccer coach, some amazing basketball coaches, whatever that were older that had been there for a long time. And so, I'd walk down the hall and sit on their chair in their office and be like, help me out, and then my administration again. I mean, it was the great thing about the athletic department at Greensboro was that it was really like people overuse this, I think, a little bit, and it doesn't really mean it, but it was really a family. Like it really was. And like, Like the older coaches looked out for the younger coaches, the administrators looked out for all the coaches. It was just everybody had been there for so long. It was just super supportive. And for me as a young head coach coming in, taking over a program, um, that was invaluable, just having it. So there was nobody outside of UNC Greensboro. It was just the people within the department that were there for me that helped me out.
So how did that first full year of non-interim head coaching go, and how long were you there, and what happened?
It didn't go great. Like, I mean, performance wise, like,
Hmm.
we weren't that good. Um, I had all these ideas in my head when I became head coach about how I wanted the culture to be and how I wanted it to change. And again, I think, I kind of have a double whammy. I grew up in New York, so I'm very blunt, I'm very upfront. And then also, I'm Vietnamese, and anybody that knows, Vietnamese, most Asians, also very blunt and very upfront. And so,
Hmm.
I'm double whammy with that. So I just came in strong, really. And I came in strong and I was like, this is my vision for the program. This is what I think it should be. This is how I think a team should be. This is how I think a team should be run. And a lot of kids, I think, were shocked by it. And
Sure.
so, I think a lot of kids didn't want to be committed at that level. And so there was some, people figuring out where their place was and where their place wasn't on the team. And I just threw myself headlong into recruiting and was like, the best way to get a good team is to recruit. And so that first year was kind of tough, but then, I got into recruiting. I started learning more about that as a head coach, the scholarshiping piece of it, which was something I was learning for the first time. And so
Right.
I was there 6 years as the head coach.
Wow.
So from that point forward.
Uh, so I appreciate your openness and authenticity about your bluntness and your two backgrounds, your New York and your Vietnamese background. That does seem like a double whammy.
Yeah.
Exactly right. But I think that's okay. And what I mean by that is it feels like, and you'll tell us if this happened. It feels like you would be okay and have the culture that you wanted in year, call it 4, when you have quote unquote all your kids there, because those kids didn't sign up for the your first year head coach. Those kids didn't sign up for Coach Nguyen.
Right.
They didn't know bluntness, and maybe, I'm sure you didn't have 100%. I'm gonna call it rebellion, 100% rebellion. That there's some like, oh yeah, oh my God, this is what I've been seeking. That, there are people who are attracted to that as an athlete coach relationship. It's your job as the coach to go find those people, because that's what's going to make your team better. So I have a feeling that if you recruited openly and authentically, meaning you were your true self during the recruiting process, and you went out and found those kids that wanted that style, that you got those kids, and then the training component comes along with the culture, and success starts happening. Did that happen, or were there
Yeah.
continued
That
clashes along the way?
No, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I,
Mhm.
you know, I think, when I tell people the good thing with me is you're always gonna know where you stand, right?
Mhm.
Like good, bad, or indifferent. Like I'm gonna let you know. I don't blow smoke. Like what it is what it is. I think you can only get better if you know, right? Like if you come off the track and I feel like you gave up, I'm gonna tell you you gave up, right? If I feel like you did everything you could and it just wasn't your day, I'm gonna tell you that too. Like, but we can only get better when we really honestly look at
Yeah, but
why we didn't succeed, right?
how do I think a lot, when you describe it that way, I think a lot, if not most people, would openly say, yeah, that's what I want. But then when it happens, you find out it's like, no, actually, I wanted a little sugar with that. I wanted
Yeah,
some softy feely there. Okay. So
yeah,
how did you, you're learning the recruiting game. Maybe this,
yeah,
maybe, I don't know, I loved it. I really enjoyed recruiting. How did you find out which kids were just saying, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, that's great, coach," because they wanted a scholarship and an
yeah,
opportunity, and how many were actually like, "Oh, yeah, no, no, my best teachers, that, and that's where I got my best grades from." How did you decipher who was being true, and who were maybe just telling you what you wanted to hear?
yeah. I think you're always gonna get fooled every once in a while, but I just got to the point in recruiting where I was like, the best thing for me is to try to scare a kid off.
Mhm.
And if instead of getting scared off, they get excited,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
then
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
kid for me,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
And
you need to, like, look for a no more than you need for a yes. It's like, "N
exactly,
no, coach, this isn't right. Oh, thank God.
exactly.
Good.
Yep.
Good luck. Let's move on." Yeah, 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 yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so, I found that like I started telling kids like this is gonna be hard. Like And it's going to be the toughest thing you've ever done. It's going to be tough for a long time, and it's going to be, but I'm going to support you, and I want you to be successful, and I'm there for that, but I'm also going to push you, and I'm going to hold you to standards, and I'm not going to bend those because that's who I am, right? And so I just was like so blunt with them and their parents, and was like, if you don't want this, do not do not continue the process, right? And so I think I think the kids that really wanted it, they got excited. I mean, I look back to my recruiting. I was attracted to my coach because he was intense. He wanted
Hmm.
to win. He
Right.
was fiery, and I was like, I want that because I'm competitive and I want to win. And I know if my coach is the same way, then we have more chance at success, right? And so I think in recruiting, like kids are attracted to what they want, right? They're attracted to, and so I didn't get into that thing of like tell them what they want. I told them what it is, and if they wanted it, then they wanted it, and if they didn't, they didn't.
Yeah, I think maybe more track coaches recruiting wise should be going for the no instead of the yes, because it's easy to sugarcoat and I'm gonna call it chameleon, and I mean that in a good way. Like,
Yeah,
you're like, oh, you like lots of miles? Yeah, yeah, we can do lots of miles. Oh, you're a short guy. You like 30 miles per week, but a lot of speed. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's
right.
like because we're gonna do it however I want to do it when we get here, by the way. But sure, sure,
Yep.
whatever you want to hear. And then they get there, and it's like, oh man, this kid, it's just not meshing. I don't know why. Well, you went for the yes instead of the no, and found the kids that actually would strive in your program. So
Yep.
you're there for 6 years. Is that what we said? Eight,
Yeah, so 12 years
six?
total. 12 years
Yeah.
total, and the last six as head coach.
How did the last six, as you started getting your kids in there, and that makes sense when people say your kids. I never did like that necessarily, but we're talking about the mentality, not necessarily
Yeah.
the physicality of it. How did it go getting those guys in, and you start hitting your stride as a head coach as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. We had honestly, some really amazing years. We had a tough conference. App State, Mike Curcio at App State was crushing it. Bill Gautier at Chattanooga was crushing it. And so, I had some people that like really good people that had to
Hmm.
beat. We weren't, we didn't have a large scholarship allotment. I think we had like 4.3 on each side. And so, I eventually figured out like, maybe it's better to just, instead of spreading it all out and have more people, let's consolidate it, and let's go for some studs and try and do things that way. And so we got to a point where we won, I think it was 2012, we won both the men's and the women's cross country conference. The women, I think, were, gosh, I'm getting old, so my memory's foggy, somewhere in the fifth to seventh range in the Southeast region. The men were very similar. I mean, I think we were pretty close on the guy side to getting a team through to the NCAA's. Um, but we got a few individuals through. Our men at one year, I think it was 2012 or 2013, our men were 15th at the outdoor national championships. Um, so
Wow.
I think we got to a point where it was good, but I think we hit the glass ceiling there based on, we did not have a track facility.
Mm,
So we trained at a local high school for first half of my time there, and then we trained at NC-A&T for the second half of my time there.
mm.
So that hurt us, and then the lack of scholarship money hurt us, and we just kind of hit a point where I was like, this is probably as high as we're gonna go. But it was also, I mean, it had some really great athletes there. Um, three NCAA runner up on the track, two in the 5K, one in the 10K on the men's side, um, and a few All-Americans. So
Seems pretty good.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We tend to forget, especially in track and field, that winning's hard. I mean,
It's hard,
we talk about ceilings, and it's like, bro, there's only so many that can win. One, one,
right?
one team or one athlete in the event can win. So that's really good.
Yeah.
So, sounds like some self-assessment as far as what the program is. Maybe we've maxed out because you don't know. And a lot of times we have to think about maybe we maxed out under me, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm reminded
Mhm.
we had Boo Schexnader on the program a couple years ago, a year or two ago, and he was talking about he was going on about coaches should leave to go to another job for higher pay because we don't pay coaches enough anyway, and you need to start thinking about your future today, not waiting until you're 56 years old. But he talked about, and I remember when he said this, I was like, oh, Boo, you can't, like, you're not supposed to say that part out loud. He talked about, if you think that if you're in it for the kids and you think you want to do what's best for the kids, and that's why you stay. That he was kind of making the point about not staying, go on. He's like, and if, honestly, if you are doing it for the kids, how do you leaving brings in another coach that's better for those kids than you were? And that's
Right.
where I was like, oh, but you're not supposed to say that out loud because, our ego
Right.
tells us like, oh, no, I'm the best person for
Right.
these kids. Boo. What are you talking about? So I just, it makes me think about with you. It's like, oh, well, maybe it was capped out under you. Doesn't mean they're going to get the next person that takes them to whatever the next level is, but just saying where you and your mentality and skill sets are at that point. So what do you do? Where do you go? You go back to, you go get a PhD somewhere, right? I
Yeah.
feel like there's somewhere
Yeah.
we're going to
So
start calling you Dr. Nguyen. I just feel like it's some,
no, unfortunately, no, never.
all right.
Much to my dad's
I was about to say
much to
there's
my dad's dismay,
parents. Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think like the last couple of years there, like I was never so as we started getting better, I started to get to know people and other coaches. You're going to the convention, you're going to the NCAA championships, you're meeting people, whatever. And I just never really got comfortable with the whole like, you know, you go to Eugene for NCAAs and everybody goes to the Wild Duck afterwards, and that's where everybody's trying to figure out what jobs are open and who's going to get a job and this and that. And I like to go and be social. I like to go and meet people and have friends, but I'm never comfortable with that, right? Like I was always like, I'm here at nationals because I have athletes that have qualified for here, and if I'm not 100% in for them while I'm here, then I'm doing them a disservice. And so I didn't like that. I just didn't like that part of the industry, right? Where it's like, like, dude, you're here to coach your kids to be national champions or all Americans, but at the same time you're spending every night trying to get a different job. Like to me, it didn't sit right with me, and so I didn't like that. And so I never really got into that networking part of like, so when I started thinking like, okay, the peak has hit here, and it's time for me to start looking for another job. I think I was a little bit behind because I didn't do that stuff. But luckily, I started having some really good athletes. I had Paul Chalimo there that was doing great things national level, and so people were starting to kind of know who I was
Mhm.
just naturally, I think by the things I was achieving, which is what I wanted. I wanted to have opportunities because of what I did, not because of who I met
Right.
or who I befriended. And um, so it happened. It finally happened where it was like, okay, jobs opened and I didn't know they were opening. And I got a phone call and somebody was like, hey, this job's coming open and, we're interested in you and stuff like that. And so, as a young, competitive, like really ambitious guy, I was always like, man, I got to go to the biggest level, right? I got to go to like the SEC or the ACC or the Big Ten or something like that. And that's where I need to be. And so I had the opportunity to like look at a few jobs at that level. And I quickly realized when I had those opportunities that like it actually wasn't for me, right? Like by this time I'm married and I have a young kid, and I was like the volatility of those positions, the volatility of you know of those schools and the jobs and stuff was not something I was comfortable putting my family into. And so then, talking with my wife, I was like, you know what, maybe trying to hit the P5 is not what we should do, right? And it was, and so we had a couple offers, and we thought about them, and we said maybe this isn't good for our family. And so I was like, you know what, maybe it's better if I stick to being the head coach and being in charge. Like if I'm the rate limiting factor in success, I'm comfortable with that. And if
Hmm.
if I'm in charge and we fail, then I've done it, and I'm not kind of subject to somebody else's whims or whatever. And so then I started looking more for that instead. Um and then the opportunity at University of Toledo came up, and I was lucky that my athletic director at Greensboro was, knew one of the athletic directors there, and he called them and was like, "Hey, you should look at this guy." And
Wow.
they were interested, and you know, next thing you know, yada yada yada, I'm the head coach of the University of Toledo.
You're in Toledo, Ohio, baby.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. As a former Ball State coach, I know
yeah,
the Mud Hens now. Where they?
yeah, yeah. That's right. The
Yeah,
Mud
yeah,
Hens
yeah,
and the
yeah,
Walleye. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yep.
Want to go back real quick. Just was thinking as you're talking about when you're talking about networking and jobs and things like that. It felt like you were talking very merit, what was it, merit.
Meritocracy.
I went to school in Alabama, so
Yeah.
please forgive my lack of knowledge of words. Meritocracy, right?
Yeah.
um I think a lot of people would say, oh, well, of course, the coaches who have proved themselves should get the jobs versus a coach who maybe, in your opinion, hasn't proven themselves, but knows the head coach of where that job's open or knows an administrator or whatnot. However, if that same thing, I'm kind of thinking out loud, so this is a
Yeah.
conversation. So you come back at me where I'm misinterpreting or your opinion's different from mine. If that were true in the track and field world, and right, track feels like the most meritocracy type of sport there is, right? I mean, we're just coming off the Olympic trials when we're recording this. We're a very brutal sport. You finish first, second, or third. It doesn't matter if you fall in the middle of the race or not. Sorry, there is no putting you on the team because you've quote unquote earned it. You did not earn it right then and there. So track's very merit. I don't like that word. Did you earn it type of sport? And you're describing that in the coaching profession. But if that were true, if we were truly a meritocracy type of sport, wouldn't that mean then recruits, it would almost be like a descending order list that they would all go to the power four for, all the, I'm gonna
Right.
say studs based on their high school marks. Now I'm not talking about a kid that, is a 440 miler at high school that becomes a four flat kid, which that's not even that great these days. It's
Yeah.
crazy. But I'm saying like,
I'm sitting home and in
right,
envelopes.
I
Yeah.
know it's just crazy. It's crazy, crazy. Um, but that means that, I'm assuming, I don't know much about the background. I know the name Paul Chelimo, right? I know
Yeah.
he was a great athlete. I'm assuming he was pretty good when he got to you. You made him better. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that you didn't coach him up. I think coaches do coach up, even great athletes, they get coached up. But that means if it was a completely merit based, he wouldn't have gone to, no offense to UNC Greensboro, he wouldn't have gone to
Right.
UNC Greensboro. He would have gone to an Arkansas, a Georgetown, Villanova. I'm trying to think
Yeah.
like traditional distance powerhouses. And, I think he was international. So maybe in Alabama, when I start thinking about those,
Yeah.
those kind of things. But instead, you hustled and bustled and got him to sign with your school at Greensboro versus, these other where they were, you've heard this before, where a recruit is supposed to go,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud, like in the coaching world, shouldn't it be that same? Like who gets a job, what's a job, not purely based on personality and I like this person, but not purely based on, well, look what they did at whatever level, high school,
Right.
D3, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. It's interesting, and you have opinions about it. And then, I mean, like, you hear all this stuff about like, oh, why did this person get hired for that job? They didn't,
Mhm, mhm,
there are other people who have done way more, interviewed for or
mhm.
applied for it and this and that. And then I think what you learn when you start hiring assistant coaches, and God, man, I'm just like, I so one of my best friends I met through coaching, right? He's one of my best friends. He's not in coaching anymore, but like one of my very best friends in the world, um, and was somebody who I bounced a lot of ideas and still do bounce, even though he's not coaching anymore. I bounce ideas and workouts off of him and stuff like that. And he told me one time, because I was talking about a hiring and an assistant and stuff like that, and he was like, "You've been in it long enough to know." He's like, "You can't you can't teach an assistant character, loyalty, and these kind of traits." He's like, "But you can teach them how to write a workout, how to do an expense report, how to call a recruit. You can teach them all those things." And he's like, dude, like your career can hinge upon who you hire, right? And he's like, hire the people with the things you can't teach or coach, and then coach and teach those things that they don't have, right? If you find somebody that has it all, great. But, and so then, when you're in that position where you're doing that hiring, I think you look at it different, right? You look at like as jobs are filled, you look at who fills them, you look at it different, and you don't look at it through the lens of, this person's better than that person, or this person has no experience or whatever. And it's like, well, you know what? There's a head coach whose job and whose family, relies upon this job, and they are making a decision based on what's going to be best for them, their program, the career, maybe the career of the person they're hiring. And it doesn't always work out to be the person that's the most experienced or has the greatest resume. Maybe it's the person who has the loyalty, the character, those traits. And that's, when you have an assistant coaching job open, other coaches call you to recommend somebody. If that person who calls you is somebody you trust and that has those traits, and they're recommending this person, they're saying they trust and this person have those traits, that goes a lot further than how fast somebody ran that this person mentored.
And our sport, while it seems very much on paper, black and white meritocracy, merit based, where it's like, oh, this guy coached a kid to 4 flat. This gal coached a kid to 355. She's a better coach. Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Yep.
Not necessarily. First of all, any one
Right.
athlete, I think, you being the academic side, I think you understand, like, any one is who cares? That means nothing. I need a group, show me what they've improved to the group. But there's just so much more to it. Does a kid, here's something we hear a lot. And again, I just love busting myths. And I think this is a huge myth, distortion, lie, if you will. I hear that Power 4 coaches don't want to develop athletes anymore. They don't want to take a chance on I'm going to use the 100-meter dash, 10-7, 10-8 kid or 10-6 kid. They only want the made kid, the 10 flat kid. And
Yeah.
First of all, that's bunk. These conference consolidations have reduced the number of walk-on small scholarship 10-6, 10-7, 10-8 kids, because now you have 18 teams in a conference. God bless, a kid could be 6 years before they could actually make the final. We just don't have 6 years, right?
Right.
When they were at 12 teams, I remember I was in the SEC and there was 12 teams. We could take a 10-6, 10-7 kid and make him a 10-2, and he might make finals, or a 4x1 team. And then they added Missouri and Texas A&M. It's like, well, that's, the walk-on
Yep.
standard got a lot harder. And then they added today is actually the first day. Texas
Yeah.
and,
First
and
day.
Oklahoma are in there. It's like, oh my God, like, what do you mean? So what's a better coach? Is a coach that takes an 11 flat 100-meter boy and makes him a 1050 kid. That's huge. That's what great
Mhm.
job. Is that better than a guy who takes, say, a 1010 or 1020, 1010, whatever, and makes them a 10 flat or 999 guy? The time is smaller, right? This Coach A improved him a half a second. Coach B improved him 0.2 seconds or whatnot. Can I just say the 0.5 is the better coach? I don't think so. By the way, I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think the other coach is the better. I don't know. This is,
Right.
again, but
They're
it's like
both good coaches.
taking a kid from 10-2 to
Yeah.
10 flat is hard. That's where
Right.
exactly the point. That's where my point.
Yeah.
We lose that as coaches when we say they don't want to develop any. They just want the made person. First of all, name a made person. No one in high school. Well, I get maybe, I don't know, this
Right.
Christian Miller kid seems pretty good, right?
Right.
After him, any 10 flat or higher high school kid is not going into the SEC and scoring right off the bat. They got to, you got to
Yep.
run basically sub 10 to make the finals, or sub 10 for sure to make the NCAA finals. So a coach is going to have to develop that. So
Yeah.
to say that is just bunk. So anyway, back to what we were talking about, pulling it all together here, Mike, is how do you know who is the better coach? So I love what your friend said there about, you can't teach their character. At this point, we're adults, right? We're hiring
Yep.
adults. You can't change their character. You can't change their integrity. You can't change their trust. You can't change their loyalty. Those are ingrained. Maybe they can change, but it's going to take 20 years to change. They see
Right.
the error of their ways. You don't have time to hire an assistant and wait 20 years for them to change. A lot of those other things you can teach and coach up in someone: how to write workouts, philosophy of your program, et cetera, how to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
You can teach that. That's exactly right. And that's why I think there should be even more. Another myth that's out there is that a high school coach can't coach in college. You don't know how to recruit, which that's just so dumb. I'm sorry. You can't do this, can't do that. It's like, man, go look at what these high school coaches are. Every coach, by the way, every level, I am just blown away. Like when we talk about 4 flat and, you're sitting at home, it's like, yeah, it's your fault, by the way. All you coaches, it's your fault that this stuff is going on. It's just nutsos, man. You guys are coaching too good, too good. I'm so glad I got out, by the way. I could not have been this good, man. It's just crazy, crazy. But I hear this continually, that a high school coach can't coach in college, or we won't look at a high school coach for a college position. And then, I've been doing this 270 times roughly here. I'm amazed at how many college coaches that I'm interviewing that started out as a high school coach. Right
Yeah.
now, one of the hottest coaches there is Chris Johnson, head coach of the women at Arkansas, right? Just top four, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the women's 400, the college record 317 or whatever in the 4x4. That's all just nutsos. Again, you guys are crazy in what you're coaching. Yeah, he started out as a high school coach.
Yeah. I mean, all
So
those guys that we've watched go into the Hall of Fame for the last few years, that group of coaches that are kind of at the retirement or have retired the last few years, almost all of them started as high school coaches, right? That was the way that used to be the path.
so when you talk about merit-based jobs, I get what you're saying. And maybe in the perfect world that doesn't exist, that should happen. But I don't know how it even could happen. Someone
Yeah.
has to know you. I love that your administrator knew that's part of it too, by the way.
Yeah.
That may not have been planned networking, meaning I didn't go meet my administrator so that he could enter or he or she could give me a referral one day. But because of you being who you are, talking about character, integrity, and things like that, you being who you are, that person said, you know what, I love because what you just told is I don't know if we kind of glossed over what the story you just told. That's I think a unique story. Your administrator, so that administrator has all reasons to not give you a referral. I love
Yeah.
this guy. I need him to stay here. If he leaves, I got to go hire someone else for crying. I got to do more work. And instead, that administrator, kudos to that person, selflessly said, hey, this is something you want and you think this would be better for you, man. I love you. I want what's best for you. I'll call up Toledo and give a good referral.
Yeah.
Bravo to that person. That's more selflessness that we need in this world. But that was part of networking that you maybe
Yep.
didn't. I'm saying maybe you didn't. I'm not saying you did. You did not. Maybe you didn't deserve that job. I'm
Right.
sure there's someone out there right now going, yeah, I applied for that job. He didn't deserve that job. I deserve, you know
That
what I'm
guy
saying?
sucks.
There's
Yeah.
always an opinion about that though,
Yeah.
because it's not as merit or as black and white as we like to think that
Yeah.
there is subjectivity. I always get subjectivity and objectivity mixed. I think it's
Yeah.
subjectivity,
Yep.
subjectivity to this.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna keep moving because of time. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is great though.
Yeah.
I'm really kind of exploring. I hope you guys that are listening, and hopefully our guests too. I'm trying to work more into the conversation of the coaching profession and a little bit less on the actual like, oh, you spent this many years at this school and then this. I'm trying to get
Yeah.
because I think you have so much knowledge and experience. Your knowledge and experience is really importantly that we can start helping more people by showing like, oh, you know what? I believed in what he says too, that, I looked at my resume and I'm pissed off that I didn't get this job. And it's like, oh, you know what? There's a little bit of networking involved to it.
Yeah.
Networking the proper way, by the way. I'm not saying go to USTFCA and shake hands and buy everybody beers and tell them how awesome they are and all that kind of stuff. 'Cause
Right.
that's not what networking is, but we'll talk about that later on. Okay. So you go to Toledo.
Yeah.
Love that you went to Toledo because I'm a Mac guy. I was coaching that conference. That's a heck of a conference, man. I don't think it gets the due that it should because it's a
Absolutely. Yeah. And
fun conference.
I feel like I was there in the golden years. I mean,
What years
Dennis
were you there?
Mitchell. So I was there from 13 to 19.
You know
So
what's
I mean,
funny is I would have told you I was there in the golden years back in 0203. Wendell McCraven and the other guy.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Wendell was over
Brad
there.
Hunt
Sue
was in
Parks. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's just so funny because, but
Yeah.
I think that shows how special that conference is. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. I love that.
So I mean, yeah, we had, Dennis Mitchell was at Akron,
Amazing,
Sue Parks was at
amazing.
Eastern,
Eastern.
you know,
Kelly
uh
was probably at Western.
Kelly was at
Bill, yeah,
Western.
love
Yep.
him. Yeah.
Bill Lawson was at Kent State.
Bill, come on, man.
I
That's my
mean,
dude.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it was it was a tough conference. It was very tough, and so yeah. So I went to Toledo. I was there for 6 years, and I loved it. It was a fantastic city. It was a fantastic school. The community was amazing. Um, it was we had, but there was a thing where like every summer a job opportunity would come up basically, and my wife has a career that's very important to her and very important to me,
Mm.
and she got to the point where she's like, you need to stop coming home every summer and saying, hey, this job opportunity is open, are you interested in going there?
Yeah,
Because
you ain't
she's like,
single, bro.
yeah, she's like, I need to build my career, and she's like, I need to be somewhere for a while to be able to build my career. And so she's like, she's like, we need to stop having these conversations every year. And it wasn't me out looking. It was,
Mhm,
it was just, at this point, I did know a lot of people,
mhm.
I had accomplished some things, and so I was getting calls or whatever. And so we sat down and we said, okay, if we spend the rest of our life in Toledo, are we going to be happy? And
Mm.
we said, yes, we would be perfectly happy with that. And we said, okay, if we didn't live in Toledo, where would we want to live? And because of family, my wife grew up in Atlanta. She's born and raised in Atlanta. My father lives in Atlanta. And we were like, the one place we would live, like if I was not a coach, like if I got fired and I was out of coaching, where would we move?
Mhm.
We'd move to Atlanta. to be near
Mm.
family, right? And so we were like, okay, well, that's the one place. So she's like, okay, so we've agreed. She's like, we're staying at Toledo unless a job comes open in Atlanta. And I
Mm.
said, yes. And she's like, what jobs in Atlanta would you take? And I was like, well, there's only two in Atlanta that I would take. And both of them have coaches that have been there for a really long time. And so they're probably not going to come open.
Right.
And so she's like, okay, great.
Can I
And
assume that was Georgia Tech and Georgia?
Georgia Tech and Emory.
In Emory. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. All right.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. And my wife's a tech grad. So she was like,
Ooh,
she would
yeah.
never ever let me work at Georgia ever. Ever. So she was like, so we made that agreement. And
Yeah.
and a few months after, like that was in the summer. So then in in that December, I was at convention and I was having dinner with a friend and he said, hey, I know you have connections to Atlanta and you have family down there. Would you ever be interested in Emory if it came open? And I said, yeah, I would, but I don't think that's gonna come open anytime soon. He's like, well, it is. So I was like, oh, okay. So I went back home and I was like, guess what? This job's gonna come open. And my wife was like, let's try for it. Let's see what happens. And so when it opened, I reached out and you do the whole thing and then was lucky enough to get the job. So
Now, Ling, you're not, you are striking me as a guy with ego. Now, pause when I say that. I know
yeah.
there's a little bit of like, what the,
No, I have one.
I don't, yeah, well,
I
I
don't
think
deny.
I think everybody
Yeah.
does. And I don't think ego's bad, by the way.
Yeah.
Ego is what, makes us get up and work out because we want to look better or we want to be healthier. Ego makes us go to coaching education because we want to be a better coach. So ego's not bad. Bad ego is bad.
Right.
I'm not sensing that part. But ego, you can't have bad ego without ego, though. So what I'm wondering is, and this is a real topic I wanted to make sure that you and I approached as well. So, spoiler alert, by the way, he goes to Emory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you go to Emory. Emory is a Division III program.
Yeah.
You have been at Division I.
For
I'm gonna
18 years.
say
Yeah.
your
My
entire
whole career.
coaching life, right? You came
Right.
from a Division III athletic background,
Yeah.
um, but as far as coaching, you're used to athletic scholarships and going for a MAC title and recruiting and all those things. So, how did you uh, how did you process and you obviously have a lot of other things going on, meaning a wife and family as well, and family in the Atlanta area. How did you process? Okay, I'm going from Division I, which society tells me is the top division. And by the way, if you're not watching on YouTube, I 100% did air quotes there. I don't think Division I is the top. I'm very kumbaya. I don't think any of the top division. I think all of you, no matter if you're JUCO, high school, NAIA, NCAA, you're affecting young people positively. That's the number one. That's the mountaintop here. They just have different budgets and sporting regulations, meaning Saturday SEC and things like that. Those are different. Okay. Um, so how did you handle any bad ego that came into your mind of like, I'm a Division I coach. There's a title for that. There's I'm hi, how you doing? I'm Ling. I'm a Division I coach. That's a thing you would have done to your neighbors or something.
Yeah.
And now you're going to Division III, which to society, not to coaches, not to this guy here, society could be a demotion, a downgrade, whatever negative connotation there. How did you process the move from a Toledo to an Emory?
Honestly, it was not a problem for me. Like I look at Emory and I'm like, it's one of the best schools in the country, one of the best schools in the world academically, right? Like it's well resourced, it's beautiful, it's in an amazing city, it's got everything. And I'm just like, when I think no matter the division, no matter the sport, you can probably look across the country and say, pick any sport in any division, and somebody who knows that sport in that division could tell you the five schools that are most likely to win a national championship,
Mm.
right? There may be somebody else that'll sneak up every once in a while and win one, but there's probably five, maybe six schools that are the most likely to win, right? And to me, when I looked at Division III and I looked at cross country, track and field, I was like, Emory's got to be one of those five, right? Like I think when I look at it, right, and that was me from the outside looking in. I had to get down here and see the inside of it and get to know that before I knew for sure. But I just looked at it as like, okay, this is a school that has the ability to win at the highest level, which is at the national level. And I hadn't experienced that yet,
Hmm.
like I'd been at Greensboro in the Southern Conference, I'd been at Toledo in the MAC Conference. Very unlikely that either one of those schools in any sport is ever going to win a national
Right.
championship as a team, right? So then I'm like, well, could it happen at Emory? Like, why wouldn't it? Like our swim team at the time had won 10 titles in a row. Volleyball had won multiple titles. Like, I mean, I think we have the
Wow.
most team national titles in Division III in history, all sports combined, right? And so I'm
Wow.
like, it happens there.
Hmm.
It's not happening in our sport, but it happens there in sports that are similar. So
Right.
again, if I'm the rate limiting factor, I'm okay with that, to go there and see if that's what I can make happen. And I mean, I also look at it this way, right? And since I've been at Emory now for 5 years, and every year I've had multiple Division I coaches call me and talk to me about the move and how I handled the move, and like, is it hard? Like, is it hard to not be at the top and this and that? And it's like, if you're doing it right, you're all in where you are. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like when we were at the Southern Conference cross country championship and we won, none of us were thinking, coaches or team were thinking, yeah, we won, but it
Yeah,
would have been
but
better if we won the SEC title, right? And when we're at the MAC and we won that conference title, we weren't thinking, man, the MAC is great, but it's not the Big Ten, right?
right.
And when you're at a D3 national championship and you're an All-American or you're a national champion as a coach, as an athlete, you're not thinking, oh, great, that I just won national title, but it's not the real national
Yep.
title.
Yep.
You don't
Yep.
think that,
Yep.
right? You where you are, and you're just involved and engrossed and wrapped up in where you are. And
Yep.
so for me, that's enough, right? Like I get to coach kids, I get to make kids better. We get to go face meaningful competition and challenge for conference or regional or national titles. And I don't care. I don't care how many capital I's are after the D, right? On the trophy. Like that's just an arbitrary thing. It's
Agreed.
completely arbitrary. And so, I think you're right though. I think it is like uh, you have to be like, all right, am I chasing glory as a coach? For me, what am I doing here, right? Like, am I trying to move up as far as I can in D1 because that's where the glory is, like, right? The air quotes, the glory, or what am I after it for, right? And for me, I just want to be good. I want to win, absolutely, 100%. But if I win a national title, you know, if I'm blessed enough to win a national title at Emory some point during my career, it will in no way be lesser than any national title that anybody else won that year,
Yeah,
which
I love how you put that because if you look at the kid who wins the high jump at Division III versus the kid who wins the 1A Oklahoma high jump versus the Olympic high jumper, and I take away any insignia on their jersey that tells me what level they are, and I just look at the face and the attitude, they all are excited. It's the tippy top for them. I love that. And I love your story about other coaches calling because I do wonder, I've made this statement before, I get the privilege of interviewing coaches from D1, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, summer coaches, high school coaches, club coach. I think I've had every level. Yeah. Professional coach. Yeah. We've had everybody, every level that I can think of for track and field on here. And I've always said, I was like, who just seems just a little bit happier? D3 coaches. I was like, I think they've cracked the code. You start a little bit later in the fall. You're not going straight from Labor Day. You have some different rules, some off times. You don't have athletic scholarships. You don't have the, you
yeah.
think that'd be the awesome thing, like, but that comes with a lot of other things that you have to do and that you can't do and things like that. And kids you can get, not get. And I'm always like, man, I wondered, I coached for 10 years. I've been here 18, had that year in Vegas. So I've been off for 19 years. I sometimes wonder, I'm like, if I'd have stayed in coaching, would I have figured it out yet? Would I have figured out that, what, coaching at, Denison, Ohio, or
Yeah.
Emory, Georgia, or where's Emory real? Just thinking, I would call
Yeah.
small towns, still college, still coaching, still going for a national title. I was like, I wonder if I'd have figured it out by now that, what, coaching is not about coaching shouldn't be about the ego of who's on my chest. By the way, in society, that's all built by the TV contracts on Saturday, the college football,
Right.
by the way, not your track team. Sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe your basketball. You talked about Duke earlier. Maybe your basketball society has pegged you as a good school or big school for that reason, but not because of track. As good as the
Yeah.
track, I mean, think of the histories of USC's and LSU's and Florida's. I'm sorry, they're still Saturday LSU games that they're
Yeah.
really about in. And we make these sacrifices where we'll, I think abhor is the right word. It's a pretty strong word here. I abhor, dislike, hate volunteer coaches, not the coaches themselves. I
Right.
don't like coaches working for no money. And we do these, I see these job openings every day, every year, 20 grand, 25, heck, less, I've seen 12, 15, things like that, 30 grand in today's world, those things. And I'm like, oh man, you could make more by coaching at a D3 school, but you won't because you're air quotes better than that. You're a D1 coach, so you're gonna go make 20. And
Yeah.
maybe you can eat ramen for your life when you're single. Maybe. I still want better for you than that. But in your situation here specifically, we're talking about being married, we're talking about having kids. You're doing them a disservice. It hurts me. It really does. It hurts my heart because we don't pay any track coaches enough in aggregate, and then they let their ego, their bad ego, get into it and won't go and still do all the positive things you talk about getting into coaching for.
Yeah.
I want to help kids get better. I want them to believe in themselves. Hey, guess what? Those kids are available in D3,
Yep.
by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
why is a D1 kid only worthy of that? That's not true at all. So I love that. Um,
Well, I'll tell you who figured it out quick was my wife. She was like, "All right, now let's go over the schedule." And I was like,
yeah.
"Okay, well," I was like, cross country kind of the same, indoor kind of same. I was like, outdoor nationals is at the end of May." And she's like, "Oh, okay. So that's the first round of nationals. And then when is the final round?" And I was like, "That's the final
Same
round." And
weekend.
she's like, "Okay, so that's the final round." She's like, "So then what about like USA juniors?" And I'm like, "Well, it's probably not going to be that big of a part of our life, USA Junior." She's like, "Okay, what about like, USATF championships?" I'm like, maybe not that much either. She's like, "Okay, but then you're going to have to go to New Balance for recruiting, right?" And I'm like, it doesn't really make sense at Emory because, between, academics and finances, like, you're shooting fish in a barrel at a meet like that. And she's like,
No,
"So."
no, no. You're shooting fish in the ocean, I think is what you
Right,
meant to say. Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Not
Yeah,
the
yeah.
barrel, not the barrel.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah, yeah,
ocean.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
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 and
yeah, yeah.
she's like, "Well," so you're done at the end of May. And I was like, done at the end of May for the summer. And she was like, "Why didn't we do this years and years ago? Like, why didn't we, you know?"
Ling, as smart as I think you are, your wife sounds
Oh, she's way smarter.
okay. All right.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Not even close. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we got to be smart. We're at our time. So if you can give me a few minutes here, I would appreciate that very much, Ling. I mean, I really
Yeah.
do think there's a lot of value in that. I really do. One of the reasons I was very intentional when we started this podcast to have all coach NAIA, D3, et cetera, was I kind of two things. I wanted to show um, that it didn't matter what was across your chest, that you make a positive impact on young people no matter what level you're at. And by the way, no matter how good you make the kids, by the way, I don't think it's a different experience if the kids achieve like all state and all NCAA and all those kind of things. But if a kid just comes there and just improves and learns social skills and things like that, that is a huge impact. So that was one. The other one was to also show that just because a coach has a big football name on their chest and versus another one who doesn't, that you know what, you have a lot of similarities. There's a lot of air quotes big time Power 5 coaches we've had on this podcast that have a lot of similar experiences that you do, my friend. It's not about who's paying that paycheck. It's about what are you doing to affect the kids in our sport positively. So I really do appreciate that. So to wrap us up here today, you're at Emory year 5. You've been done for a while, which is amazing. I know there's coaches listening going right now going, yeah, maybe he did find the cheat code. Hold on, wait a minute. You've been done for a bit here, brother. I've been going on, and guess what? July. Oh wait, today's July 1. So this is the new recruiting and all that. So, oh my gosh, and they're going off to Junior Euros and all this stuff. And it's like,
Yep.
bro, your family misses you. Seriously.
100%.
And by the way, I said
Yeah.
bro, but hey, hon, you too. Your
Yeah.
family misses you. So, uh, tell us, as you know, again, you've we've really been able to understand that you seem to always kind of have a year to 5 year, like you're always kind of forward thinking here, not just in the moment and today in this season that's coming up. As you look at Emory here and you define what the future is, you look at the future of Emory, what's got you excited about what's going on there for the Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, we we've just gotten better and better every year that we've been here. Our men's and our women's teams both finished top 10 in program of the year rankings this year, which I don't think we've ever done. So we're very excited about that. I mean, it's cool. Like you said, not having scholarship is one of the best things about my job. And we're not divvying up. We're a well-rounded program. We do it across all events, which is super fun. Um, you know, we want to win. We want to win national titles. There's a lot of other people that want to as well. So it's not going to be easy, but ultimately, like, I don't believe that you set your goals low. I believe you set your goals high, and you just work toward it. So I got a great staff that I love. I got great kids that are awesome. It's a fantastic university. I actually have to explain less to people who Emory is than I did who Toledo or Greensboro was. I mean, because
Wow.
it's just
Yeah.
such a known university.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I'm just super proud to be here. I love it. I've told my administration they're either gonna have to fire me or I'm gonna die, sitting in my chair. But like, I'm not leaving. Like, this is it for me. So I want to see what the ceiling is here. I want to push it. I want to try and find it, and I want to, make it higher if we can. I'm super happy here. I'm very excited about it. I just love it. And yeah, I think I'm lucky that I didn't have to make a lot of stops in my coaching career. It's not something I wanted to do for me or for my family. And so I
Yeah.
feel, only going to 3 schools has been a big blessing for me. And so I'm really happy about that, and happy to be where I am. And yeah, I'm in a good spot, and I'm pumped about it. So
I love the full circle you gave us. You talked about you're a guy who believes in having setting the bar extremely high, maybe higher than you're supposed to get it, because then you'll still have high. And that was exactly Brooks Johnson's philosophy in coaching. I remember as much as I can argue with the Brooks about the high jump world record. And I was like, so you're telling me you think the high jump world record can be broken? And he's like, you have to if you're a coach. Otherwise,
right,
you're coaching down. And I was like,
right,
oh, I mean, literally, I was like, oh, I mean, it was just like this awe inspiring. So I love that you kind of living, Brooks is living through that attitude with you. And I think the kids are better off for it. And I think your kid, your personal, your family is better for that type of philosophy as well, that you guys are achieving higher academically, personally, socially, charity, passion wise as well, because of that type of attitude. It's a great leader on the track and a great leader as a family member there as well, my friend. So
yeah,
thank you. Thank you so much. Again, thank you for letting us go over time here just a little bit, Lang. I appreciate that patience with me. One of the most important things you can give me is time. So I'm truly, truly grateful for that, especially because we didn't get into it, but he's got a pretty cool vacation coming up that he's hopping on the plane real quick, and
yeah.
he's going to be out of commission for a while. So a little jealous, to be honest with you, but super happy for you. Super happy for what the success you guys are having there at the program. And honestly, more super happy for you that, again, I keep saying the cheat code, that you figured out the cheat code early, not in the 60s. You got it early, and you're going to be able to have, I think, a better family life for it, a better career for it. And therefore, a lot of young kids are going to go through and be positively impacted by you and your staff because of that attitude. I'm just really proud of you, man. It's so,
Thank
so
you.
super cool to hear. It really is.
Yeah,
It really is.
appreciate it.
Now you're on wax. So if he takes a job this summer and he just said, I'm not going anywhere, we got him right here. He gets to contradict himself. So guys,
Yeah,
thank you for being here. Really appreciate you listening again for another week. We're going to do it all over again next week. Join us, and we'll have some fun, man. We learned a lot. I think this is super fun for me, and I hope it was fun for you guys. Have a great week.